Brad Bradford, welcome back to Leverage.
Great to be here.
It's so nice. I'm always so honored when I reach out to Heather and I'm like, I haven't seen Brad in a while.
Let's get
book
together.
a date. Let's get together. Although I feel like we're always interacting with all your posts because I'm like, yes, please. We need more of that. So I will get to the Brian Lilly articles from this morning later, but I want to chat. I want to hear about what's going on at City Hall a lot. I want to start with the most recent, amazingly uncomfortable for everybody in the room but you, live stream at City Hall. Talk to me about why you did it, where the idea came from, like what the reaction was in the room.
Sure. So what we're talking about was a motion I had brought to council actually last month, really calling on the mayor to increase transparency and accountability out of her office. It's a big city, 3 million folks. There's a lot of stuff going on, and not everybody has time to follow council meetings or committee decisions. And in fact, I think a lot of my colleagues and the mayor count on you not paying attention, and that's why a lot of the bad stuff happens. I try and keep a track of what's going on, what's coming out of the mayor's office, what the priorities are, what she's working on. And for a while, either myself or my staff team had been attending her press conferences, going into the room as a member of the public in the spaces and the facilities funded by taxpayers, and watching her press conferences and paying attention to what she was saying. A couple months back, her deputy chief of staff kicked one of my team members out of the press conference.
I'm not a fan of hers,
and said to this individual, some councillors' offices are welcome, but not yours. That was the quote.
Is that even allowed?
Well, I don't think it is. And again, I go back to the fact that this is a taxpayer-funded resource. It's a public building. It's an office. And again, think about it. If you're the mayor and you've decided to call a press conference, theoretically, you have some ideas that you want to get out there.
Right.
So why would you try and hide from that? Why wouldn't you want a record?
Right.
So brushed it off the first month, but then we went back the next month and the same thing happened. And the deputy chief of staff followed it up with an email basically saying to be clear, you are not allowed at these things. If you want to attend, you need to ask our permission first. It's fine. We fire back and say, okay, well, we would like to attend.
Yeah.
That was 35 days ago and we never heard back, no reply. So all of that is the strange story of how we got to this motion.
Okay.
And the motion was just saying, look, if you're calling a press conference, live stream it and put it up on YouTube, just like we do with all of our council meetings and committee meetings. There's a record of it there.
Interesting.
And I think because, frankly, with this mayor, with Mayor Chow, there are lots of instances where she will say one thing to one audience and then say another thing to a different audience, and it's hard to keep track of that. And so
I've never seen that.
Home Depot, for example. We don't have to touch that.
No, we don't. But we all know.
We know.
Yeah.
So anyways, so the motion was just sort of look, if you're going to kick us out of the room, that's fine. I actually don't need to be in the room. Just live stream it. And when I started looking into this, I found that the previous administration did this on a routine basis. We did it 70 times during COVID.
Right.
They were always live streaming press conferences. And if you look at cities or jurisdictions like Ottawa or even Hamilton, they do this all the time. And so, of course,
I love the loophole. They're like, oh, you don't want me there? All right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just, again, how do I make sure that Torontonians have access to this? And then there's a piece about democracy. And what I found became clear when they made that comment, some councillors' offices can be here, but not yours. It seems to me like it's really about silencing the opposition or making it more difficult for me to engage as an elected member of City Council in some of the critiques. If you go to Queen's Park or you go to the Hill, when anyone's scrumming or having a press conference, the opposition is there to respond. And that is part of our democracy because we want to have different views and perspectives in our government. It seemed to me very obvious that this was personal. She doesn't want us there. She doesn't want to have to withstand those sorts of critiques. And long story short, they kicked it to committee. She has the staff drum up a report that says it's going to cost $600,000 to do this. They need to go out and buy a couple vehicles. They need to hire 4 additional.
$600,000.
That was the number in the report.
So we're just going to go to Max in the background and ask if he wants to live stream it.
Right.
He's available. Our videographer is available. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And probably could get it done for a little bit less than that.
Yeah, just a little.
But, you know, like thematically, like anything the city of Toronto touches, it's going to be like 3 to 10 times more expensive if anyone else did it.
Well, they'd have to hire 10 committees to get a decision out on it.
And I kind of made the point, we are sitting in a room. We were in the committee room discussing this. I'm like, there are 4 cameras here. There is an AV staff person in the back. We are literally live streaming this right now.
Right.
So you could do all of this within the existing staff complement. We don't need vehicles. We don't need to hire more people. We don't even need new equipment. It exists. You could just do the press conferences right here. And by the way, I'd seen it done before from the Protocol Lounge, which is outside the mayor's office.
Right.
Anyways, all of that is possible. But you start to understand it was never about that. And the staff drum up this report as a distraction, put a number like $600,000 out. And so long story short, I sit down in committee and I deliver my remarks, bam, live stream it to Instagram, you know, broadcast the whole thing. Yeah. And that's kind of the cool thing about where we are in 2025 is you could be on CTV Toronto, you know, from Zoom. You could be doing CBC The National from your phone. It's so much more accessible. And yeah, there are ways that you could do it, I guess, higher res or better bandwidth.
It doesn't cost $600,000.
Yeah, that's
I'm
right.
sorry, just
That's
the
right.
logical. I mean, so I'm so curious because I watched your live stream and the other counselors, no one seemed comfortable.
Yeah, well, people are upset that I'm pushing back on these things,
Right.
and I very much view my role as somebody who's been duly elected to be down there to be fighting for the things that I hear about from Torontonians every day.
Right.
And as we continue to make decisions that, you know, end up in head scratching and why are we doing this and how is that a priority? We got to hold elected officials to account, and that includes me, and that includes my 24 other council colleagues, and that certainly includes the theoretical CEO of the city, which is the mayor, because her priorities seem to be way offside with the vast majority of people I hear from, and it is my job to push back on that, and I take it seriously.
No, you definitely do, and I would say that it was your hard work along with Mr. Pasternak,
Yes.
who fought vigilantly for securing, what did it end up being, 50 meter. It was a 50 meter protective, and I don't remember what it was called, I apologize, but it was a protective bubble zone around institutions like schools and hospitals, mosques, churches, and synagogues for everybody's safety. And again, this is for everyone. I think that people don't realize that this is not just for one. And I was talking to our mutual fund, Ariel Kimmel, about this. ABC Toronto also fought very vigilantly for this. And I bring it up because in conversations that we've had, there has been a lot of bait and switch on the mayoral side to avoid even tabling this. So this was, how long would you say this was actually being tabled as an option to protect again, the vulnerable in Toronto?
This had been in the works, notionally since October 8th.
Right.
So what was that, 21 months?
Yeah.
So a long time.
Yeah.
In terms of formally moving something on it, Councillor Pasternak and I moved last May, over a year ago, to work with the province on this, and the mayor.
Oh, provincially, that's great. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that was the strategy, because if you go back and you look at the bubble zone legislation around abortion clinics, which has been on the books since I think 2017 or 2018,
Right.
it was a province that did that. By the way, it's a 150 meter perimeter, and the same.
But only 50 for schools.
Well, and the same left-wing ideologues and radicals, and
And come after us because they're radicals.
well, they would run through a brick wall to protect those bubble zones around abortion clinics.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow this is an infringement on charter rights when we're trying to protect vulnerable residents who have been subjected to hateful mobs and threats of violence.
There were children with disabilities.
Trying to go
in
to
a
their
school.
places of worship or faith-based schools. So, it started May of last year. with a simple request to work with the province. The mayor, despite us asking the province for help on everything, every single meeting, didn't want to ask for help on that.
Sorry, I had to do that.
So,
Subway for everyone.
This is an example of you just keep pushing the boulder up the hill. It took us 3 different attempts to finally get there. And, it's helpful. This is not a panacea. Some people feel like this discussion is one-sided, and I point to the statistics that 93% of the hate crimes and hate incidents in the city of Toronto have been anti-Semitic in the past 20 months. So if it feels one-sided, it's because it sort of is.
It is.
But this, of course, protects all people.
Well, that's what it is that it protected,
whether
didn't
it's
just
a temple
protect the Jewish community.
or a
it protected
masjid,
everybody.
a mosque, a synagogue, a church, all of these things should be
It was
and
a
can be.
blanket request.
And you know what? I talked to folks from a lot of different communities, and it's not so long ago that they had been subjected to similar types of attacks or hate. And so a lot of people actually understand this. It is the radical left contingent of activists that are looking.
Progress Toronto.
Yeah, for sure, Progress Toronto that will try and
put out propaganda to say that it was infringing on people's rights to protest. It was absolutely not that whatsoever.
Try to make it about labor. Tried to suggest that they wouldn't be able to have labor protests, just nonsense. But this
QP's going out soon, so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and Fred Hahn is disgusting, and QP, and all the stuff that's happening right now. I cannot.
And a really good friend of Mayor Chow's.
Well,
so there you go.
I would never. If I was a member of that union, you'd be calling for his dismissal, and I know they have, and I know
it's
actually even
impossible
his
to get
board
a union
did.
out.
Yeah.
Impossible. I was actually. That's for another episode, but I was actually in one once in my lifetime, and I lost years off my life trying to get it out. And unfortunately, all the laws are completely against. You only need 51% to get them in, but you need 90% to get out. The numbers. Anyway, I can't even get into it. My cortisol will go right out.
To wrap on the bubble zones, though, we ended up getting something passed. I worked with Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Cole, Councillor Rachel Chernos-Lynn, Councillor Nunziata, Councillor Matt Lowe.
Interesting.
Well,
kind of.
In the end, he ended up doing his own thing and not supporting it. But we thought we were all
which was a shame.
Doing it together there, and it's it's not the best bylaw. Certainly, we all had to make some compromises to get something that people could vote for. Pasternak had tabled to make it 100 meters. That wasn't.
50 was better than 0.
50 was better than 20.
Yeah.
We were able to.
It was going to be 20 at one
That's
point,
what they started with. Yeah. And they removed the requirement to effectively be victimized first. We removed a bunch of the requirements for additional bureaucrats and staff. We extended the period of applicability from 6 months to 1 year. There were things that we were able to do to make it less bad. Right. But that's the sort of compromise that you need to do to get these things over the finish line. And while I find it abhorrent and inexplicable that we all as a council wouldn't unanimously be supporting this and voting for measures to make it stronger, you saw Mayor Chow and others vote against systematically everything to make it better. They voted against that. They voted to defer it that morning, punt it up to another level of government, and then finally at the end, to save face, she hit the green button to approve it as amended. But no leadership on this, just sort of dragging her forward on it. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because we got it done. And I'll tell you, I was in the chamber that day, and it was a very long debate. And I kind of left feeling a little bit dejected about it, feeling like, man, why is it so difficult to have this council and this mayor do the right thing? Why couldn't it have been more? I would feel the same frustrations probably many of your listeners would. But I went over to CJ Pack that night, and I met a woman who was having overcome with emotion. There were some tears in her eyes, and she just said, "You know what? Thank you so much, because this is the first time the city of Toronto has done anything to protect vulnerable populations, including the Jewish community, since October 7th." And that ground me in perspective of what this means, because I get caught up in the sausage making of this stuff, and it's not great. And but then you hear from people and what it means to them, and it's something you can feel good about.
We were all very, very impressed with how hard you guys worked for it. And listen, like I said, it could have been 0, because the other ones are voting for what their voters want, and those voters want 0. So yeah, thank you for all, because I know it was tireless work, and I know it was a huge boulder.
The community, honestly, the community rallied so hard, and we wouldn't have been able to do that without folks speaking up and demanding that we actually try and do something.
Too humble that we demand things all the time, but it doesn't happen.
That's good. You got to get engaged.
So you also recently had a press conference on King Street. So tell us a little bit about that also, because if anyone has been in the downtown core recently, I was horrified. I'm going to tell you, I went down to the Eaton Center last week. I ran the Under Armour 10K on the weekend, and I had to go pick up my kit in the Eaton Center. I couldn't take a picture of this because it would have been really horrible, but it was just a perfect example of what is happening in the city of Toronto downtown. So at the corner of Yonge and Dundas, are we allowed to call it Dundas anymore? What have they renamed it? I don't even know. Anyway, so there was on the east-south corner, there was 4 visibly homeless men, okay? And there was a care worker, whatever organization she worked for, and she was coming up to give them clothes, okay? And so they were sitting on a ledge just on the edge on Yonge Street, and behind them is the Yonge and Dundas Square, which I don't know if anybody uses anymore. I don't go downtown. Right behind are these 4 girls that don't look like they're from Toronto. They're probably like tourists, but like just Southern Ontario, whatever. They didn't look like they were from somewhere else. And they're all taking a picture. Like they're taking the selfie, and there's 4 homeless men behind them getting clothes. And then that's all. You've got literally zombies. I mean, I don't know if anybody saw, like who's listening, went to the Maniscalco. He came and did a stand-up show, and he said, "What happened to Toronto? Why do I feel like I'm in a Thriller video?" Isn't that horrible? Like, isn't that horrible? So, like, So take the congestion of King Street, which I want to get to, and I've gone on a tangent, but you know, if you go downtown, you can't get anywhere. Yeah. And then when you get out of your car, like I was a little bit nervous to get out of my car in that parking lot.
Of course. Yeah. No.
And there were security guards outside a Green P at Yonge and Dundas. And I worked in that Club Monaco. When I was 16 years old, I worked there. Yeah. And it was always, a little sketchy, and there was Fillmore's or whatever it was up the street, but like, it was still safe.
Sure. Yeah, safety and crime in Toronto is a massive problem. And it does not feel like Olivia Chow cares about crime. I was chatting with a mother the other day. They've had their vehicle stolen 2 times from their driveway, and now their 9-year-old gets up in the morning and rushes to the window to see if their car's still there. And that's just become commonplace here in the city. So there's a lot of work that we have to do on that front, but we do have to prioritize being a city of law and order, and that has absolutely slipped away, and we're seeing the ramifications of that.
Can I ask you a question before you go on? Because I as I delved into all of these things and different amazing people that I have on the podcast, where do you feel that really falls from like a city versus a federal level?
Yeah, it's all of us.
Because really, at the end of the day, we've got a massive problem put in by the Liberals of the catch and release. And I know now all of a sudden Doug Ford is complaining about it, even though he supported the Liberal Party in the last federal election. Again, don't get me started. But, I feel like I have a good friend whose father is an ex-cop, and he's like, no one they just don't want to do it. They don't want to be canceled. They know the person's going to get out. Is there something that can actually be done on a city level?
That's a local leadership problem. I'll touch on that in a second.
Please do.
Federal government, criminal code.
I'd love some clarification.
The previous government made some changes that made it much more difficult to prosecute people, made it much more likely for folks to be released. The provincial government, should really strengthen some of the laws around bail. Yeah. I know the premier was upset about that the other day, but there is a role for the provincial government.
Well, that's because his car was stolen.
Right, and not all of us have a OPP detail standing outside of the office, outside of the house 24/7. So
sorry, no offense. His you're lucky I didn't catch you. What was the point of that? Anyway,
here in Toronto, neighborhoods are having to come together to hire private security. And so
I have film on my windows. So if someone comes and breaks it with a hammer, they can't get in.
Right. And and
I live in a safe neighborhood.
Right. But this is the reality in Toronto. And then lastly, I would say what we have seen happen here in Toronto, particularly over the past sort of 2 years, has been an increase in violent crime. It's been an increase in break-and-enters. It's been an increase in antisocial behavior on, transit or around the Eaton Centre. And then like a very deeply disturbing rise in hate crimes and anti-Semitism that's been allowed to fester like an infection here in Toronto. And the challenge is once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's hard to get it back in.
Yeah, you can't get it back in. No.
And so, when it comes to supporting our police officers, that has to start at the top with the mayor. And
does it start with her? Does it start with the police chief?
The police need to know that the elected officials are going to have their back. Because
Great point.
Like you've got these paid protesters that are going in there and they are looking for manufactured conflict. They want an officer to go hands-on. They want to have that physical interaction and they're pushing for it. And when the officers deal with that, doesn't look good on social media. It's it's uncomfortable. Clearing an encampment doesn't look good, right? Like these are the things that
they're scared for their families, right? Like then their kids get singled out at school. Then
and so when politicians will always hide around the notion that we don't direct the police. Well, that is technically true, and there's a good reason. Right. Like you wouldn't want a politician saying like, "Oh, go arrest Rachel and charge her with this." That's not where we want to be. But you can say, we have these bylaws on the books and I want them enforced. And I want to make sure that you've got the resources out there to be able to go and enforce it. And I know that's going to be difficult for your guys, for the brave men and women who are tasked to do this, but I will support you. And then at the press conference that we're going to have afterwards, because it's going to be difficult, I'm going to be standing with you and making the case like, no, this is a city of law and order. We are going to enforce the law and the order, and you have a choice. Breaking the law or not breaking the law. But if you do break the law, you are going to be prosecuted and there are going to be consequences. And this is what it looks like. And so that's an option that's available. Of course, that is not anything that we've seen from political leadership in this city for a long time, certainly not with this mayor, but that is what it is going to take on a go-forward basis. So all three levels of government have a role to play, but obviously for me at a local level, it is about leadership. It's about supporting law enforcement and making sure that we're standing shoulder to shoulder with them when they go do the difficult but necessary work. And, helping make the case public that we're going to be a city of law and order.
And it is top down. I agree. I always think back to that, and I'm aging myself, but that old Giuliani approach. Everybody could hate Giuliani now, but like when he took over New York and cleaned it up, it was always very interesting. He started with, as they said, the turnstile guys, right? They were like, why are you dealing with a guy that's jumping the turnstile and trying to save themselves $1? All you're doing is, you're arresting the petty. He's like, but if I start here, it cleans up the rest of it, right? It was like, I'm showing you, I won't even accept this level, right? And it's a very good point. And I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there about who is responsible and for what, right? So they're like, well, and there's a lot of finger pointing. So it's like, well, the federal government has this catch and release and they're soft on crime. So what are the Toronto police supposed to do, right? And it's like, but you're absolutely right. If we had the right leadership saying, no, I'm going to stand up there with you. I'm going to support you. I'm going to take the heat for you. This would all, you put a bow on it.
Yeah. So, that's like downtown, we see that every day. People are not taking transit because they don't feel safe taking transit.
Let's talk about transit. Please.
Yeah, well, I mean, you heard the story last week of needles sticking out of the seat on the TTC.
No, I did not.
Yeah, you can Google it. But so that's really unnerving, right? And I just think...
People shooting up on the TTC. That's fantastic.
Smoking crack on the TTC. These are the types of antisocial behaviors and stuff that takes place. And, There's a option in response to that. We need to have more special constables. We need to have more law enforcement. People need to understand that when you are taking the TTC or in a station or on a vehicle, there's a reasonable chance that you're going to see a special constable there or an officer. And the reality is 99 times out of 100, you're not. And so New York has had a lot of challenges with their transit over the past couple of years, and they have made a strategic and dedicated response to put more officers in the stations, on the vehicles, and it's helped.
Oh, it has?
It's helped because you're not going to necessarily go out of your way to light up the crack pipe if there's an officer on the train with you. Like you're probably not going to do that.
Are they putting police officers, or are they security guards, or who have they got right now?
My understanding is a combination of police officers and special constables, which are like an officer but dedicated to transit.
But like like mall cops.
Yeah, it's not people that are writing with a notepad observing.
Right.
It's people that...
Because they're also, by the way, like I don't mean to be rude about that. Like they're lovely people, they're getting paid for their job, but they're also just employees like who have been hired to stand. They're a body.
They're doing their job to the degree that they're able to do it, which is observing.
Exactly. That skill set, unfortunately, is not there, which is not necessary for that role. Right. And that's why I'm wondering, because the last time I was on the TTC, there was a woman sitting across from me, and she was very upset with someone. I don't know who it was, but she was very erratic. Yeah. And you sit there and you think, okay, it's an afternoon, there's a full car of people, but I don't know, she could go completely nuts. And who's going to be here? We're going to push the button. Who's coming?
And how did that make you feel?
I felt very unsafe, for sure. I mean, I might have turned my podcast up because I was really interested to hear what she was saying. Like, she was completely off her rock. But it was also very sad. Like, she was now here. She needed to be somewhere. She needed help.
She needs help, and there are programs in place, 2-on-1, calling for mental health crisis support workers, if that is in fact the case and what was needed there. But the point is, you didn't feel very good about that. You didn't feel particularly safe.
I did not, and I don't have to take the TTC every day.
And so what did that do for your likelihood to go and take the TTC again?
Much less.
And so this is kind of
unlikely.
This is a way that we can
0 out of 10.
This is a way we can get to the sort of King Street proposal is how do you reconcile the fact that people still are not back in the office in the way that we would like to see. There are still increasingly high vacancy rates in downtown, and yet traffic has never been worse. And so how do you reconcile that? Well, it's because during the pandemic, people stopped riding transit. They got their own vehicles or got comfortable riding in their own vehicles. And so the folks that are going downtown at a higher percentage are driving. And so even though there's less people there, which is a separate problem, more people are driving. Yeah. And we're not going to make the case to get them back on transit if you're worried about the antisocial behavior or sitting on a needle. And so those are directly related. And so as a result, congestion in the downtown core, driven by a number of different things, but it is getting worse. And that's why I had a proposal today to stand up a practical solution and provide more capacity on the east-west roads, because right now, we are replacing a 142-year-old water main on King Street. That needs to happen. That makes sense. We understand that. But this, you'll remember, was Mayor Tory's King Street pilot that became a permanent thing, dedicated streetcar route. Well,
by the way, I worked down in the Ernest Young Tower back then. No one understood how. You saw people going through. You're like, am I supposed to go? The signs were not clear. No one really understood. They couldn't get into their office building. Then you're coming out. You didn't know which way you were to go. It was a disaster.
I think it very much.
Is it still there?
Well, it is, and I think and the irony or the thing that's frustrating is right now there's no transit on it. So it's a transit priority corridor where we've said no vehicles, but because we're replacing the water mains and the streetcar tracks, there's no streetcars. So the common sense practical proposal was, look, you have messed up Adelaide and Richmond, which were our only east-west pipelines that used to function. And here's what they look like today for folks that don't get downtown. Right now on Richmond and Adelaide, one-way streets, east-west, used to have 4 to 5 lanes. We have put in a bike lane. We have put in streetcar tracks. We have vehicle loading zones, and we have Jersey barriers, the concrete barriers that take an entire lane to protect a left turn lane. So the end result is that we had 4 lanes. We now have 1 lane.
For how many people that live in Toronto?
and we've taken the King Street streetcars and the Queen Street streetcars and put them all on Richmond and Adelaide, because both of those are closed. So all that is to say, I have
a shit show downtown.
I have a proposal to say, look, while you're doing construction,
open it up.
And,
but why wouldn't they just do that automatically?
Well, why weren't we building the Gardiner 24/7 automatically? Why did the city try and ban tobogganing? Like, there's a lot of things.
Ban tobogganing?
That was a couple years ago. But, putting cats on leashes. Like, there's all these crazy things that happen at City Hall. But your point is, like, this is so obvious. And this is why this is why people lose their mind, because the obvious thing that, anyone that thinks about it for 2 seconds would say, well, if we're not running streetcars on it, we don't need it to be streetcar only. And my proposal, and I'm sure the staff will come back and say it's going to cost $1 million, but actually you could just you could take a couple garbage bags and put them over the signs and just open it up. And it's not a panacea, but the Star asked me today, well, won't this lead to more people driving?
Star,
and I just said, no, this is not about increasing driving, it's about increasing road capacity. Use the road that is there today that is not being used, and allow the people that are stuck over here in a traffic jam to disperse that out a little bit.
Brad, when do you feel like logic was lost? I'm just like, everything you say seems so logical, and yet everyone
depends who you ask.
Is just like,
yeah.
No.
Well, you know what? There's such an inclination for some of these folks to carry water for bad ideas, to carry water for bad administration and leadership. And I'm just like, I think it's so offensive for people to go out and gaslight the residents of Toronto and tell them that they're the problem, when in fact the problems are at City Hall. And it's embedded in ideology within the politics, within the bureaucracy. And we have to change that, because people just fundamentally want a safe city. They want a city that they can get around. They want a city they can afford. They want a city that works. And when we're not able to just sort of manage traffic on parallel arterial roads in the downtown, manage construction, coordinate that, do basic things like that, then the more difficult things, whether that is housing supply or dealing with law enforcement, those become bigger challenges. So, like, clean the snow when it snows, cut the grass, and let's do the best job that we can, making sure that people can get around the city, get home to their families faster, get back to the job site, without having a meltdown about it.
Yes, our mayor is very happy to donate lots and lots of money to certain things, but doesn't know how to get our streets snow plowed. And quite honestly, you're absolutely right. I think there's things that, and again, it happens to do with your bubble. Like, for example, I run in High Park in winter and the summer. One of your fellow councillors thought it'd be a really good idea to close High Park to cars. So that the businesses inside High Park, so there's there's one family, it's an individual family, it's not a corporation, an individual family owns all the restaurants inside High Park. No one's in them because no one can get to them.
Right.
There's a huge parking lot. Right. They could go and enjoy a beautiful breakfast, and they could have their family, and then no cars. Never. There's a cop car. We pay for a policeman to stand in front of the barriers and make sure there's no cars. Now, and I'm a runner, and I don't want to be run over, but there's speed limits, which, by the way, the bikes go faster than the cars do, what are allowed to. And there's a zoo inside. There's like, how does anybody?
And I hate to, like, you don't want to be political about it, but there's a parking lot there. Like, there's a parking lot and a ring road, and it was set up for people to be able to. A swimming
pool. There's an ice rink.
And you don't have to drive to High Park, but you could, and that's all right. But it is the ideology, and I don't want to say war on the car, but again, like, what is so bad about people electing to drive to High Park? Some people are going to ride, some people are going to walk, some people are going to take transit. If you live across the street, good for you. But it is a citywide asset, and for some people, it's a question of accessibility, and driving's part of that. I'll tell you, here's another thing we didn't think through. Did anyone talk to the baseball associations that permit in the park? Like, now you've got folks coming in, parking their cars, because it's not like they're not going to drive. They still drive there, parking their cars outside, and then lugging duffel bags, hockey bags, equivalent full of bases and baseball kit, bats, all that stuff, drag them into the park. Because before you used to be able to park by the ball diamond. Now you can't. It's just like, you didn't think about it at all.
No, they don't.
And I feel like I'm ranting, but the other funny thing that council has done now is Parkside Drive, notoriously congested, one of the key arteries north-south down the lakeshore from Bloor. Yeah. After banning cars in High Park and making it only for bikes, we are now putting in a bike lane, taking away a lane of traffic on Parkside Drive. Mm-hmm. And again, because people don't follow what's going on in City Hall, I don't think people have any idea that this is going to happen. But when it goes in 2026, they're going to lose their minds, because we've now taken away more road capacity right beside the park that we already said no cars, only bikes.
But Brad, I would give you $100 right now if you can name me 5 streets downtown that have more than 2 lanes. Like really, like I think about driving around.
It's a good challenge.
It's a good challenge.
I actually don't know.
I don't think you could. I mean, really, when you think about the arteries going up and down Dufferin, Dover Court, like I literally am thinking about all the ones that I would use as I drive around the city seeing clients doing showings. I was driving home from Dufferin the other day from a showing in Roncesvalles, and I said to my husband, I said, I think that every single person in Toronto is in Dufferin right now because but you think about it and you're like, it's one lane is parking, or which we need, granted, or there's a bike lane and then there's one and you can still make lefts, you can still whatever. Anyway, I digress. One last thing I wanted to address was the new, what did you call it? The sixplex.
Sixplexes, yeah.
So City Council voted that this was now allowed in all residential neighborhoods, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so it's been through committee and it's going to council.
It hasn't been voted on yet.
It's been passed a committee.
Okay.
I'm on the committee.
Okay.
It's going to go to council, and I suspect there will be some matuations and changes at council, but we can talk about that.
Okay, so please tell me, as part of the committee, how you envision this and why this is a great thing for Toronto.
Well, look, I'm a big supporter of multiplex. I'm a supporter of new types of housing and new neighborhoods. And if we want to address affordability, if we want to address supply, it's not going to be government and taxpayers subsidizing to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars on subsidy on a per door basis. It's about introducing more supply that more people can afford. Right. It's no secret that we need more purpose-built rental, multiplex, which is the idea of sort of it's one building with a couple small apartments in it. Right. Very common in cities like Boston. I actually lived in one, Montreal, New York. It's a lot of the stuff that you walk around old neighborhoods and say, that's really nice. Yeah. Here in Toronto, even in the Annex, they've got a lot of multiplex. It's like 100 years old. I have that in the beaches, like south of Queen Street, down by the water.
True. There's tons.
Yeah. So it's a form that has existed for a long time, but our zoning bylaw for many years post-amalgamation prohibited. We've changed that and we've introduced pathways to build more multiplex. But where the market is right now and the challenges around financing and making the math pencil on projects, the
math is not mathing.
It's not mathing, yeah. And so, and at the same time, we're going to enter this very, what I think will be damaging period where no projects are starting. We're there right now. But people do not understand the size and magnitude of layoffs and job losses that are going to take place in the construction industry. And I don't think people realize and appreciate how significant the construction industry is for our economy in Toronto and Ontario and Canada. So park that to the side. Let's focus on sixplex. Really, it's the same envelope, exactly the same as like a multiplex, which typically had 4. Okay. And now we're saying, if 6 units makes that a little bit easier for the math to math, it increases the supply of housing that we're delivering in terms of units, and that's an option. Okay. Now, I don't think it's going to be a panacea. There's been a sixplex pilot in Ward 23, which is Scarborough North. And over the past year, and do you know how many of these have been built? Yeah, 0. So 0. Yeah. So for the folks that are...
By the way, I just guessed once.
Yeah, so it's 0. So for the folks that are concerned this is going to have an avalanche effect and like blowing up the neighborhoods, I don't think that that's going to be the case. But I do think that in a city of 640 square kilometers where, your neighborhood looks different than some, and I live in a very dense 23-foot lot, old railroad worker 1920 house where our house is basically touching our neighbors, like all good.
East York, absolutely.
Yeah, but, maybe there's parts of Etobicoke where it's that sort of more traditional 50, 60-foot lot, bungalow, and that doesn't work there as well. So I think that in order to get these things through, to get it passed, much like with bubble zones, we're going to have to work together as a council and maybe have some matuations that look a little bit different in different neighborhoods. Do I want it in Beaches, East York? Absolutely. Will I support it? Absolutely. Yep. But if I have a colleague in Etobicoke who's like, look, I can't vote for this as it is, and at the risk of the whole thing failing, is there a different treatment in Etobicoke that might be more comfortable? Yeah. And I think we're a city where we should be able to.
One size doesn't fit all. I totally appreciate that. I was more curious in the sense of like where you saw the opportunities. Like, is this more of like a development new build, and do you feel you'll be able to pass it in a more productive way than, let's say, like the major roads bylaw, right? That was kind of dead on arrival, and we've talked about before.
Yeah, I don't. I think with the market conditions today, nothing's a home run. I think we need to.
You're lucky to get first base.
There's this unique policy misalignment between CMHC financing on things that are 6 units.
For sure.
It comes in at 6 units, but right now we don't provide DC exemptions for that. So if you go over 5, you trigger development charges for all of the units instead of the additional ones. And projects, when you're $100,000, let's call it in on DCs at the City of Toronto, projects of this size and scale just immediately fall below the line and don't work. So all of that stuff, which I have been pushing and fighting for, just common sense reform there, has been met with opposition by the mayor. But we're going to have to fix some of that stuff. I think long term, as the market starts to return, hopefully over the next 12 to 18 months, what we're doing now is setting the table. Set the table so that when people are ready to go, they can just go. But I don't think we're going to see a ton of these overnight. What I do like about multiplex, though, is it brings in a different type of builder. It creates opportunities for different types of investors.
Yep.
It creates opportunities for different types of living in different neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So it's a unique product that we haven't seen. Mm-hmm. And so it'll be a new class of builders and people who want to get involved in the real estate business and go out and actually build something.
Right.
And that's positive because housing doesn't just build itself. We need people to take those risks, to make those investments, to bring their time and their talent, their expertise to build housing in Toronto. And I think if we can make it easier for them to do that, that's a good use of the government's, local government's time.
And I think that's a really great point because I think that a lot of time at the political level, they don't recognize the risk involved from a builder standpoint. They make all these laws and bylaws and whatever, and they're like, here you go, here are the rules. And then they're like, they don't incorporate that. But I also appreciate that you're fighting for this, even though you'd be like, well, why are you fighting for this if there's no market for it? But if you're fighting for it during the market, then you've missed the boat already, right? So you're prepping everything. So you know what? When the sausage is ready to be made, it'll be made and you'll have all the tools for it.
You have to have a vision. You can't just think about today
or be
tomorrow.
Reactive, right? Yeah. Proactive, which is great. All right. So have you watched the Rob Ford documentary?
I have not.
Okay.
I haven't. I just Netflix at mine is like Aquanauts and different things for the girls, Cocomelon. But
yes, for sure. I'm sure. Don't.
Yeah.
That would be I would say, hard pass. And then before you leave, yes, go ahead.
What I would just say about that, I went to Ford Fest last Friday or 2 Fridays ago. It was the first time I've been. It was a really unique experience. Obviously, there was a bunch of political people, but what was more interesting is how many people were there that were not political. And so, there is something to Ford Nation. There are lots of individuals and communities here in Toronto that I think often feel very disconnected from government for good reason because government ignores them. But I think part of Rob Ford's legacy was engaging with people that historically have been marginalized or ignored. And so I don't know if the documentary gets into that. I think probably maybe less than what it should because you focus on the salacious sort of controversies that we all know.
Yeah.
But the really, for me, it's not about the sort of personal challenges that he had. The more interesting story is what he did. And really as a populist politician, one of the first in modern time. Yeah. And that actually is something more interesting to hear about and to learn about. Yeah. And then seeing the legacy of that, which the Premier benefits from, and you go out to Ford Fest in Etobicoke today and it's still very much a real thing.
That's amazing. I didn't even know it was still going.
Yeah.
I would say that one of the things that I got out of it was just how much he shook up, and this is what we're talking about, right? Is like really just shaking up the standards and saying, hey, you know what? Garbage pickup is an essential service. Sorry, dudes, you can't strike. Like certain things that TTC, like no one thought of, and outsourcing it and finding money for the city and things that, you know, people were just shocked at. But he shook things up and he did a lot of really, really great things for the city. And yes, he had his own personal demons, and whether he was a good man or not, I don't want to comment on, but I would say he did a lot of great things for the city of Toronto, for sure.
We have slipped back into mediocrity. We've slipped back into status quo.
We are not
you know,
the city I recognize.
we're a bureaucracy that is so embedded in a culture of risk aversion, and you know what? It looks like it. It looks like it. So you're gonna have to shake things up and do things differently if we want profoundly different results. Otherwise, we're just tinkering at the margins, and you're gonna get different versions of the same thing over and over.
For sure. And on that note, as I'm reading Brian Lilly this morning, who seems to want to hint at something, are you planning on throwing your hat into the ring for the official mayoral race next year?
Well, we are certainly planning. We are certainly having conversations. You know, nothing is definitive, but in my role as a city councillor, I get to go out and hear from people who are making contributions to the city, their hopes, their aspirations, but also their frustrations. And I can tell you, as what I describe myself as a reform bureaucrat, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be sorted out on the staff side. And absolutely, the political leadership in Mayor Chow is failing Toronto right now. It's failing Toronto families. It's failing Toronto businesses. This is a city that has so much potential. I'm bullish as hell on Toronto, but we need to unlock that potential. And we do that by, you know, making sure that it's a government that can take care of the basics. When it snows, we clean it up. The lawn is mowed in the parks. The rec programs are open so that you can have a great quality of life. And we take care of the basics and we make it a city that works. And we have strayed so far from that because, you know, when it comes to Mayor Chow's initiatives, you know, generally we're trying to be all things to all people. And government, local government in particular, is about prioritization and having a clear mandate. We need to focus on the basics. We need to stop trying to do everything at a C-, D+ level and deliver on those basics at an A+. And if we can do that, then we will see people want to come back to Toronto. We will be a destination for international talent, for capital, for investment, because we need to be a city where builders want to come, where they want to invent the next big tech product, where they want to build more housing, where they want to start a business, where they want to raise a family. And it's all about unlocking opportunity for people.
Amen.
And I don't see that right now. So we're talking to folks from across the city, and I'm listening to them very, very carefully. And, you know, I think this is a city that's worth fighting for, and that's something I'm going to do.
Me too. Well, if you do, and I hope that you do, Brad Bradford, and anybody who wants change out there, you are the vote to have, and the only vote. I would think, and we were talking about this before, there is no one in the last 6 months, if not a year, that has spoken up like you have and fought for the things that this city needs. And I call on all of the candidates that potentially decide they want to throw their hat in the ring. Shame on them, because I'll say, where were they and what were they doing every single day for this city when it wasn't about election time and the camera in their face? So kudos to you, Brad. It is always a pleasure having you on Leverage, and thank you.
I love it. Great to be here in North York, and we'll be back.